Hey, so I would watch these videos from time to time, and I'd heard the term. Like I mostly heard Jordan Peterson talk about it because there was a time when I really enjoyed listening to him. I just I just am different now. Um, Nevertheless, you talk about doing shadow work and integrating your shadow. You never talked about shadow work, but you talked about integrating your shadow. And I never knew what he. I mean, I kind of had an inkling of what he was talking about, and I would listen to him talk, and I would say, it sounds a lot like what the type of things that I do in AA. I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I've been in AA for nearly 10 years now, and um, a lot of the work that you do in AA and through the 12 steps is painful work, and you do a lot of uncovering of your character defects and your flaws, and you do inventories of the things that you've done throughout your life, and you really take a good hard look, and you are essentially living under consistent self-analysis. And I mean, if you're doing it right, you are living in complete and total, like, all the time. You live in self-analysis, and not in like an obsessive way of where, oh God, did I do like blah blah blah. It's so do I, how am I engaging with this person? Do I want to have to apologize to this person for, excuse me, things that I've said? And you don't want to do that. So you end up tempering your speech, you end up tempering your behaviors and your actions in a way that encourages you to be consistent. Because what I don't like making amends to people. I don't want an apology. I don't want to apologize to you for anything, because there was there was always pride there. It wasn't like I wanted to do the right thing for the sake of doing it right. I wanted to do the right thing for the sake of not having to do something that was right, so you end up doing something right anyway. So what happens with that is eventually, if you're doing it right and you're consistently practicing all of the other aspects of this program, which I'm not advocating anybody do. I'm just saying this is something that I did. This was my path to the spiritual awakening. In addition to all the other things that had happened to me over the course of my life experiences, which was the beginning of the genesis of the this arc was as an experience on LSD when I was 17 years old, and that kind of sat in the back of my brain, coming up every once in a while as I went through life. But I was always analyzing that, and like trying to figure out, was that what I saw? And it turns out that no matter how many times I looked at it, the mark was indelible. I could not see that thing, as much as I did not want to see it, as much as I didn't want to see what was going on or what had happened. I just it happened. So I had an experience at the end of my active alcoholism where I found myself with a gun in my hand, and I was going to kill myself. And in that moment, something happened where my children were young at the time. I have two boys. They were 5 and 3. And in that moment, I was standing there with the loaded gun, and I can see it now. I saw the entirety of the aftermath. I could see everything. I could see the wall on the other side. I could hear everything. It was a terrible, terrible vision. And for whatever reason, I was married at the time. My wife came in the room and asked me what I was doing, and I took the gun apart. I don't even know what I said. I don't remember what I said. I was drunk. But in that moment, clear as day, clear as the clearest day, I saw everything that happened after that, and I had decided that I wasn't going to do that. And so when, fast forward, I go to AA and I start working the steps, and I keep working and working and working until you work until you're never done. You're just never done. And that's fine. It is as it should be. You should never be done. And so so I went through all this time of uncovering all of these things and exposing them to sunlight and disinfecting them and taking an inventory, and then taking daily inventory, and then taking moment by moment inventory, and then eventually you live in a state of consistent inventory, and you're always analyzing, and how can I make this better? What am I doing? It doesn't mean that you're like walk on water. It means that, because overwhelming majority of the time that I was doing these things, whenever I would uncover something and be like, I don't want to do that, I would immediately do it. Immediately. Causing great harm, terrible suffering to the people around me, great harm to my relationships, real harm. And it got to a point where I was starting to see what was happening, what my actions were. It finally, like, all the mental Tetris kind of fell into place, and I started seeing the things that I was doing. So I started to change my behaviors in a real way. It didn't happen overnight, and it's a work in progress. It will never be done. The work will never be done. I believe that. Because the ego still lives in me. You talk about the ego some other time, but the ego still lives in me, and the ego is the shadow. And so the ego is my shadow, and it contains all of these conceptual assumptions that I made about life and things that I thought were real, which were not. And they all built this armor around me. They built this armor that was nearly impenetrable. But a series of events occurred in my life where I was exposed to probably the greatest pain, not my own pain, somebody that I loved. I experienced such incredible pain that something, I can't snap, but if I could, it would snap. Something like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden there was an entire world of a whole realm of perception that descended on me, is the best way to put it, and that's a whole different story. But I'm just trying to cover the broad strokes. And this was just a couple of months ago. And as it happened, I don't know what happened. But I know that something happened. And then to say that there was a crazy amount of synchronicities. Synchronicities still occur for me. They are still occurring. But there was just an insane amount. It's just one after another, after another, after another. And I could not even, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was going crazy. I was having visions. Things were popping up that were seemingly impossible. things happened that were seemingly impossible. And so again, these synchronicities, some of them had to do with pointers. These things kept pointing me in directions, and they were all pointing to the same things, to the same types of things. There were books like the Red Book by Carl Jung, A Course in Miracles, and then I found a collection of people, some more esoteric than others, we'll say, but the one who introduced me to the concept was Eckhart Tolle, and he was absolutely instrumental in bringing this idea to the forefront. It had always existed in the back of my head since at one time in my life, I was a Catholic. And there were aspects of it where I just it did not jive with what I knew. And I don't know how, I'm pointing to the back of my head like there was something there. But like in the back of my head, I knew that was not the case. I knew it. I knew it in my heart. No way. No fucking way is that the case. It can't be. You are telling me something that can't be true about God, about Jesus, about how I should be, about what I should focus on. Don't focus on yourself. So I focus on everybody else. And if I do something wrong, I have to go admit that I did something wrong. Well, in AA, I can admit I did something wrong to the person. I don't have to wait until I see a priest. Because, believe it or not, my knowledge is that they are God, and I am God. I am an extension of God's consciousness. They are an extension of God's consciousness. And why wouldn't I go to that person? Because they have all of the knowledge. They have all of it. They are everything. Like I am everything. So, I never believed that I needed something outside of myself. But my mind was so obscured by alcohol. Before that, it was drugs. And then I moved on to alcohol because I joined the military and I couldn't do drugs anymore. I would have still done them. I got out of the military. I drank. I got sober through 9 and a half years of sobriety. I came to a place where I had worked through all of these things. And so the shadow work was done. I had been doing it consistently. So by the time I got to the place where all of that pain finally cracked the ego, it cracked it just open enough. And then there was no stopping the light. You could not stop it. It arrived. And so when it came, it was like a thunderbolt. It was lightning and thunder, and it was absolutely bananas crazy. So people talk about the shadow work. For most people, that is something that has to be done. You can do it pharmaceutically, you can do it through yoga, you can do it through meditation, you can do it blah, blah, blah. There's lots of ways that you can get to that place. Some people it takes decades. It took me 10 years. But when that happened, immediately I could see I could see all these points in my life where it had been revealed to me and that I was too screwed up, or I was too ignorant, or I was too focused on getting a female, or I was ambitious about one thing or the other. And so I would always push it off as being something that was other. That's ridiculous. Because I believe in science. To a degree. So, after all that happened, the shadow work had been done for a long time, had been going on, for a long time, not done. And, eventually what happened was I woke up and all of that stuff burned away. And it's not even that it burned away. It was, the best way to explain it is the way that Eckhart Tolle kind of explains it, and I have my own interpretation of it, is that the ego fills all of the space. The ego tries to build. It's continuously building. It's continuously putting layer on layer, like paper mache. It's just slapping layers on. And it gets so big and unwieldy that because it clouds your judgment and it makes your whole space tiny, and it fills that space because it keeps telling you this is your space. And that's not the case. There is an immense, undescribable vastness of the interior of your mind and soul that you can't comprehend. So as I've realized that was the case, there was a moment where, and I can explain it at another time, but there was a moment where I was confronted with this vision, and as it passed through me, it opened everything, and I just was in awe and cried and just stood there like, I cannot believe that this is real. I knew it to be real. So, wrapping this up, is that the idea that I had all this work to do to get to where I was, it was an epiphany to understand that I had already done the work. The work was done. And that in that moment, it all opened up, and the ego, which thought was in control, it thought it was in control, suddenly lost control. And it was cast into this deep space, this limitless space. And so every once in a while it makes its way back and it reasserts itself. And I have my moments, for sure. But it's always now followed by the idea that is the idea, the ego. And then there's me. And I look at it and I go, that's funny that you did that. You should go now. And it retreats back into the vastness of space, which it is understandably afraid of, because eventually it's going to die out there. And so that's my shadow work, for what it's worth. Thank you.